Hello and welcome to today's edition of Credit Matters TV. Today we're going to be talking about the Gulf and the corporate and infrastructure credit quality in that sector related to a report we're just about to release. I'm pleased to have today with me Kareem Nassif, who's a senior analyst in our Dubai office. Kareem, can you tell us first of all, who do you think will be most impacted by the commodity decline across the GCC in terms of the corporate and infrastructure landscape?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we've seen in the last 6 to 12 months, we've seen some impact on the commodity exposed entities, particularly the corporates. So we've seen rating actions on Oxia, which is chemicals merchant entity. We've seen some impact also on entities like Petrofac and Boretz, both oil services companies. However, it's important to stress here that the bulk of the credits have been able to withstand the commodity decline. They are either well-structured entities in infrastructure, such as RasGas, or they are entities that can withstand because they have a lot of cushion in their financial numbers. So I think the other element of the rating actions has been the companies that are exposed to sovereigns that have experienced downturns. As you know, the GRE or government-related entity link to sovereigns is important in our portfolio. So, for example, we took actions on Oman during the last 6 months, and also on Bahrain. And Saudi was turned to negative outlook. So those entities, SABIC, Oman Power and others were impacted not because of underlying quality but because of the sovereign. I think on the underlying side, the companies have been doing well and they've been able to withstand the commodity decline. And I think the other dimension that I'd like to mention is the issuance levels have actually gone down a lot in the last sort of August to August. By about 58% across corporates, sukuk and bonds. And that is also, if you like, a signal of the end of the boom period in the credit cycle and perhaps us entering a sort of a tipping point for the Gulf markets.
Right. Well, you mentioned the sovereigns. I mean, what measure are the Middle East Gulf countries taken to counter the decline? And how is that sovereign pressure actually impacting the corporate and infrastructure world?
You raise a very important question here because the sovereign nations have in the Gulf have had to act. We're no longer in a situation now where, you know, they can afford to watch as commodity prices fluctuate. They've actually taken concrete action. And amongst the concrete action is because of the fiscal deficits which we see across all of the Gulf nations this year. We see aggregate growth drop by a half to about 2% across the GCC. So the real reforms include, for example, subsidies, the removal of subsidies. So in the UAE now, fuel prices are based on a fuel benchmark, which is market-based. In Bahrain, they've been talking about meat subsidy reform. In Oman, they increased gas prices to introduce cost-reflective tariffs within their power sector. In Kuwait, they started to remove subsidies as well on commodities and fuel. So I think it's a very interesting time now. They're taking real actions. I think, however, that being said, I think the impact on the corporates is at the moment limited to, for example, the downstream entities, Alba in Bahrain, which is on the downstream side, and also Qatar Fertilizer, because they are seeing obviously the impact of reduced subsidies, but not really resulting in any major rating changes at this point.
Sure. Well, turning to sort of general macroeconomic conditions, how well equipped do you think are the Gulf corporates to withstand any further weakening? Indeed, how well equipped are they to weather an interest rate hike which may happen?
Yes. I mean, I think it's important to stress here that I talked about rating actions on Oman, Bahrain and Saudi. The majority of our Gulf nations at the moment are on stable outlook. They're still highly rated entity governments, so single A, double A, with the exception of Bahrain, obviously a triple B, but mainly stable entities, with the exception of Saudi and Bahrain that are on negative outlook. So that helps, if you like, the environment. The other thing to keep in mind is we looked at a scenario where we hiked up the interest rates. We looked at 150, 200 bips rise in interest rates, and we saw how does our corporate infrastructure sector withstand. And what we found was there is still quite a lot of financial cushion in the financial ratios to withstand that and not really change ratings, whether it's real estate companies, oil and gas companies, infrastructure companies. However, what we do think is going to be interesting is the concomitant byproduct of a rise in rates on some of these industry risk elements. So, for example, what would happen to the real estate market, to retail real estate companies, if this interest rate hike were to lead to sort of a weakening in GDP growth, a weakening in consumption patterns, a weakening in demand. Even utilities could be impacted by a weakening in demand in the long term. So it's more the long-term byproducts of an interest rate hike, which I think we would need to keep an eye on.
Good. Thank you very much, Kareem. And that concludes this issue of Credit Matters TV. Thanks for watching.